Hello there my Jedi and Sith friends, and welcome back to another Star Wars video. So today we've got a very different kind of Star Wars update, and it concerns one of my all-time favourite shows. If you followed my coverage of both seasons, then you know I'm a huge Andor fan. But as with all things Star Wars, whether it's the prequel trilogy or Kenobi or the Acolyte, not everyone is going to have the same opinion. There are many of us who enjoyed the show for what it was, a very well written, dark and gritty spy thriller that was the perfect prequel to Rogue One. But some Star Wars fans disagreed. There were those who just found the show boring, others who said it didn't have enough lightsabers or the Force, and one criticism which we heard time and time again is the series didn't have enough aliens. And that is where today's video comes in, because as it turns out, the original version of the show was much less human-centric. One or two of the characters that we've come to know and love were originally not human. This information comes to us from the upcoming Art of Andor book. I can't wait to get my hands on it, and I've got a feeling there are going to be some other eyebrow-raising revelations. But before we dive into it, make sure to hit the big subscribe button down below, ring the bell for notifications, give this video a big fat thumbs up, but no more jibber jabber, let's dive straight in. So when it comes to the aliens in Andor debate, I find it a super interesting conversation because I'm coming at it from the perspective of someone who loved the show. But I do think to a great extent, fans who made the criticism do have a point. And I think what they're really trying to say with this is that because there were no Skywalkers, because there were no great connections to Order 66, or Palpatine or the Jedi, there just needed to be something else to compensate for that lack of classic Star Wars feel. And while it applies to Andor more than any other project, I would say fans have been craving more alien worlds and a greater variety of live-action species for many years. Ironically, the Mandalorian and Grogu is an exception to this. They did the weird and wild alien species incredibly well. But when it comes to Star Wars Andor, what I think we often forget is that first of all, Lucasfilm actually responded to this complaint for Season 2. The alien cameos were ramped up to a significant extent. And secondly, while you can definitely make the argument for the Rebellion, the same can't be said of the Empire. Palpatine's Imperial regime was remarkably xenophobic. Aside from Grand Admiral Thrawn, who we'll talk about in just a moment, Palpatine was very anti-alien. In fact, he prioritized humans so much that non-human sentients were barred from certain areas of public life. This included bans in the Imperial military, sanctions on alien businesses on Coruscant, mass exterminations, genocides and torture, which were alluded to in Andor's first season with Dr. Gorst, and even enslavement. The Empire had an insane human bias. So when Star Wars fans say there should have been a few aliens in the ISB, that wouldn't be very accurate to Star Wars lore, both in the expanded universe and canon. But did you know it almost happened? You might remember a certain Avril Hirt, played by Jacob James Beswick. He was originally Dedra Meero's assistant, before being promoted to ISB supervisor. Originally, he was conceived as a Chiss. That's right, the same species as Grand Admiral Thrawn. He was nearly painted blue just like Lars Mikkelsen in Star Wars Ahsoka. Now this detail is more important than you think. Had they gone through with making Hirt a Chiss, it would have changed canon forever, and it would have had massive ramifications for the authority of Thrawn. From the top down, Palpatine's regime was extremely hostile to any non-human. They saw them as lesser, just for being of a different species, and as a result, to have hired one, to have nurtured one, and for him to have risen through the ranks, there would have had to have been something extremely special about him. And of course, there was. His tactical prowess and his genius. His intellect and contributions were so great, the Empire was willing to look the other way. And it should be noted at this stage, there were a handful of other exceptions. The Oathkeeper, the Grand Vizier Masamida, and of course the menacing Sly Moore. So you might be wondering, well, if Palpatine is so xenophobic, why did he keep these guys around? And another question linked to this, if Palpatine's master was an alien, when the Clone Wars came to an end, why did he suddenly become so pro-human? Well, the answer is quite simple. We have to separate Palpatine's personal beliefs from his regime. Palpatine perceived everyone under him as a functional cog. He was obsessed with his own ego, so he kept his sycophants around, regardless of their species. Confidants like Masamida were exceptionally loyal and brilliant. He was a bureaucrat who managed the exhausting day-to-day administrative tasks. Again, one of Palpatine's tools. It's not that Palpatine himself was anti-alien, but he saw a benefit in ensuring the Imperial institution was. It was just another tool for control. He could just use it as an excuse to otherize an entire species, to dominate their worlds, steal their resources, enslave their people, and make it seem like he's the righteous one, that they went in there for reasons of, quote, keeping the peace. Because at the end of the day, Palpatine kind of hated everyone. He didn't care about anyone but himself. His ultimate goal was immortality and unlimited power. It didn't really matter to him what species anyone else was. At the end of the day, his master was immune, and his first apprentice was a Zabrak. Intellectually, I just don't think he cared enough. But he was able to use xenophobia to maintain rigid, really harsh standards. And we literally see this on full display in the very first Star Wars movie. In A New Hope, we understand pretty much straight away that the Empire is an overwhelmingly human institution. Its military, bureaucracy, and political leadership are dominated by humans. And because of this, in the context of Andor, they should have depicted the Gorman people as non-human. But even as people of the same species that the Empire favors, Andor Season 2 showed us a very cruel truth. That if a planet has a resource that the Empire wants, they will employ the most violent methods to get it. And the population of said world is treated as expendable. I guess with Gormans, because they don't originate on our screens, I always imagine them as aliens. The first time I read about Tarkin landing on a group of protesters during the Gorman massacre, I always imagined they were squished like, quite literally, human-sized bugs. And I always envisioned the incident as an example of the Empire's depravity. The fact they were aliens in my mind just added to that. It contributed an element of human supremacy to Tarkin. It's the othering. Cruelty was the point. Now returning to the book, there is no expansion on Heart's relationship with the Chiss, if he knows who Thrawn is at this point, if he's related to him, but my theory is that in the earliest concept art, they were trying to evoke the physicality of Thrawn, without ever having to use the character on screen. But I think they made the right choice. It wouldn't have made sense, he's better off as a human. So had Heart been a Chiss, because he's not a character I would describe as a genius, it would have just created really strange canon implications. What the book does say is this. At the time, we were coming up with ideas for just diversifying the general human ranks of the ISB with aliens, and at the Bureau of Standards, there were 2 other aliens on set, but eventually, they decided to stick with the human designs. And did you know, my friends, and this is another juicy tidbit, there's a really obscure alien on Coruscant which I think a lot of fans missed, and his name is Tony Gilroy, clearly named after the showrunner Tony Gilroy. A really cool catch from a couple of fans, but my favourite alien of the entire show is, of course, the patient grandmother. She now has a name, Phaser. But with that said, my dear friends, some really fun Andor news today. What do you think? Would you have preferred more aliens across both seasons? And what kind of creatures would you have wanted to see? And if you enjoyed this one, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and may the Force be with you always.